Welcome back to the Compassion Forum, everyone. We are here tonight with Senator Hillary Clinton. And Senator, there are a lot of Americans who are uncomfortable with the conversation that we're having here tonight, that they believe religion already has way too much influence in political life and public life. How do you reassure them?
Well, I understand that concern, because part of our obligation as leaders in America is to make sure that any conversation about religion is inclusive and respectful. And that has not always happened, as we know. And it is so personal, the spiritual journey that each of us takes or doesn't take. And I think it's important that we recognize that for good cause. I mean, we have been such a vibrant nation when it comes to religious experience, in large measure because we've always protected ourselves against, religion going too far, being too intrusive. So it is a balance, and we want religion to be in the public square. If you are a person of faith, you have a right and even an obligation to speak from that wellspring of your faith, but to do so in a respectful and inclusive way. So I understand why some people, even religious people, even people of faith, might say, why are you having this forum? And why are you exploring these issues from two people who are vying to be President of the United States? And I think that's a fair question to ask. I'm here because I think it's also fair for us to have this discussion, but I'm very conscious of how, careful and thoughtful a way we must proceed.
Another question from the audience. Rabbi Steve Guto, who is the director of the Jewish Council for Public Affairs, is with us. Rabbi?
Senator Clinton.
Yes, Rabbi.
Back to China. China has continued to persecute and subject to oppression the people of Tibet. It continues to be the largest supplier of weapons to Sudan and the largest purchaser of its oil. Let's just say China is not doing all it can to stop the genocide in Darfur. You have said that America needs to return to being the moral voice of the world. Is our participation in the Beijing Olympics harmful to that moral voice?
Well, Rabbi, I appreciate your asking this question, because I think it's a question of both political and moral significance. And that's why last week I called on our president to decide he would not attend the opening ceremonies of the Olympics, because that is a public and very obvious ratification of our government's approval of the Beijing government's actions. Unless the Chinese began to take very visible steps to begin to end the suppression of the Tibetans and undermining their culture and religious beliefs, and if we could get more cooperation out of the Chinese government with respect to Sudan. And of course, I would welcome even more action on behalf of human rights. But the challenge is, how do we try to influence the Chinese government? And I believe we have missed many opportunities during the Bush administration to do so. In fact, I think it's fair to say our policy toward China is incoherent, and that has not been in the best interests of our values or our strategic interests. So I would urge the president at least to consider and therefore publicly say that he will not be attending the opening ceremonies. And let's see whether the Chinese government begins to respond, because that for them would be a great loss of face. And perhaps we would get more cooperation. We would get the process going that the Dalai Lama has asked for over many years. There could be a lot of ways that the Chinese government demonstrated it heard our concerns.
A question from Reverend William Shaw. He is the president of the National Baptist Convention.
Yes,
Reverend
he
Shaw?
is. Hello, Reverend Shaw. Good to see you again.
Senator, current U.S. policies toward developing countries, trade policies, make it sometimes extremely difficult for poor people to access inexpensive generic drugs for the treatment of AIDS and other sicknesses. How would you shape the policies of your administration to ensure that the poor would have access to and could secure the drugs that they need to improve the quality of their lives, of their families, and even the future of their country.
Well, Reverend Shaw, I agree with your description of this problem, and I believe that our government must do so much more to get generic drugs and low-cost drugs to people suffering, not only from HIV/AIDS, but the range of diseases that affect disproportionately the poor. It's one of the reasons why I voted against the free trade agreement with Central America, because there was a provision that would give even more power to our pharmaceutical companies to prevent exactly doing what you're discussing. I have been an outspoken advocate in urging that both our great pharmaceutical companies, which do a lot of good, because after all, they invent the compounds and put them together that the generics then are able to copy. But we need to do much more to get our pharmaceutical companies to work with us to get the drug costs down and to open the pathway for generic drugs. And that's going to take presidential leadership. I commend President Bush for his PEPFAR initiative. It was a very bold and important commitment, but it didn't go far enough in opening up the door to generics and getting the cost down, and as president, I will do that.
Senator, we've heard about HIV/AIDS. Many people here are concerned about Darfur and a number of other humanitarian issues. Why do you think it is that a loving God allows innocent people to suffer?
Well,
and we just have 30 seconds.
yeah. You know, that is the subject of generations of commentary and debate. And I don't know. I can't wait to ask him because I have just pondered it endlessly. But I do want to just add that what that means to me is that in the face of suffering, there is no doubt in my mind that God calls us to respond. You know, that's part of what we are expected to do. For whatever reason it exists, its very existence is a call to action. Certainly in, you know, our... You know, in my Judeo-Christian faith tradition, in both the Old and the New Testament, the incredible demands that God places on us and that the prophets ask of us and that Christ called us to respond to on behalf of the poor are unavoidable. And it's always been curious to me how our debate about religion in America too often misses that. You know, His Holiness the Pope is going to be coming to America next week, and he's been a strong voice on behalf of what we must do to deal with poverty and deal with injustice and deal with what is truly our obligations toward those who are the least among us. So maybe, you know, the Lord is just waiting for us to respond to His call, because this despair, this impoverishment of body and soul is what we are expected to be spending our time responding to, and so few of us do. Even those who are doing wonderful work with organizations represented in this audience, we are just not doing enough. And it's a personal call, it's a family, community, religious call, and it's a governmental call. And we've got to do more to respond to that call.
Yes. Quickly, you brought up the Bible. We were talking theology. Do you have a favorite Bible story?
Oh, I have so many of them. You know, I was fortunate as a child growing up to be read Bible stories, to go to Sunday school, to go to Bible school. And Bill and I read, you know, Bible stories to Chelsea. And, you know, I have talked about Bible stories and parables a lot in my life with friends. And, you know, it depends upon what's going on in my life at the time. But clearly for me, the recent Purim holiday for Jews raised the question of Esther. And I have been, ever since I was a little girl, a great admirer of Esther. And I used to ask that that be read to me over and over again, because there weren't too many models of women who had the opportunity to make a decision, to take a chance, a risk that was very courageous. And so that's the one that's most recently on my mind, because I have some rabbi friends who send me readings that go with the scripture of the week. And certainly Esther is someone who I wish I knew even more about than what we know from the Bible.